All right, everyone. Welcome to the Podman Community Cabal meeting today, Thursday, September 15th. Tom is out on PTO, so I'll be running the meeting today on his behalf. I will try to do as good of a job as he does. So we have a bunch of topics today. We have Quadlet, Kubernetes.YAML support, ZSTD support update, confidential computing, Landlock support, packaging for podman-desktop, and overview of podman kube apply. So there are a bunch of topics here. We will try our best to get through all of them today. So I think we'll get started. Let me paste a link to the doc here. If you can, please put your name in the attendees part over there when you get a chance. I've already added a few that I'm seeing here. And then we can get started. The first one we have is Quadlet Kubernetes.YAML support. Valentin, that is you. Please.
All right, thanks, Urvashi. Wrong button. I'm going to share my window. So I was volunteered by Dan to talk about some upcoming work. So please don't name me to it. Just going to tell you what we're about to do or plan on doing. The exact outcome is still subject to conversation, but it all boils down to Podman system integration. Podman runs extremely well in the context of systemd. Things like auto updates make use of it. We have a tight integration with SD-Notify, and we've recently married the systemd and SD-Notify integration also with the Kubernetes support that Podman has. So generating or running Podman in systemd is easy once you know how, and knowing how is extremely hard. So Podman exposes a command called podman generate systemd, which can help you generate containers or units based on containers or based on pods. Since the input is a pod or a container, the workflow isn't really as nice as it should be. So if you want to generate them, first you have to create a container, then run podman generate systemd. The outcome will be a unit file, such as you can see here, which I find beautiful, but probably I'm the only person on this planet who finds them beautiful because I spent a lot of time working on them and tweaking them. So once the file is generated, you have to install it, then you have to reload systemd, and then finally you can start it. So this is not really nice. The workflow should be simpler. Also, at least for a period of time, quite some bug fixes and new features went into the units that Podman generates. Recently has been rather calm, but once these units are generated, if you update Podman, you don't really benefit from it. You have to regenerate everything from scratch. Again, the user experience is not really where we want it to be. So again, this is some of the status quo for generating systemd units with Podman. Recently, with a release of Podman 4.2, we improved quite a bit on that. As I mentioned before, we married systemd, Podman, and Kubernetes, which I jokingly call Kate systemd. So here the workflow is pretty simple. It boils down to escaping via systemd escape a path to a YAML file on your local disk, and then throwing this escaped path at a service systemd template internally, which is called Podman. You can start it, you can stop it, systemd Podman will take care of us. So it's not really great because you have a file, you will have updates from Podman.
Sorry, Valentin, you're very choppy for me. I don't know if that's the case for everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it for more very choppy? All right. Let's see what I can do. I'll turn off my... Probably just a temporary fart. I'm fine here. I hope it... Please let me know in case there's another hiccup. So back to the Kubernetes integration. So this was released with Podman 4.2. It's pretty cool. I'm not sure where you can see it. So you can just throw, simple Kubernetes files at systemd. Now with the upcoming Podman 4.3, we push this even further, such that SD notify integration has been implemented for Kubernetes, so you can specify the policies via annotations. Similar things have been done for auto updates. So if you want to make use of auto updates, this is now possible also with Kubernetes by means of exactly this template. More blog posts will follow on that. Now, there is a third way of running Podman in systemd. It's been implemented by a colleague from Red Hat, Alex Larson, which is a really great way. So when you pretty much boils down to a simple unit that looks like this, you have an optional description, you have a table where you can declare your container, such as the image, the command. Here you have the ordinary systemd service attributes, such as the restart policy, and Quadlet will take care of the rest. So it's documented here. You can throw a file, for instance, an etc container systemd. The file type is .container, that's a file suffix. You reload the daemon, and then you can start the service. It's as simple as that. So Quadlet is especially interesting, for edge use cases. It's also being evaluated for automotive. Let's say more traditional sysadmins are looking at it because the workflow is great. You have a file that is easy to understand and declare, and when you update Podman, the units underneath will get regenerated on boot, and off you go. Much better than generate systemd. Now we're working on, or we started talking about marrying these three things in a way that we can realign Quadlet with Podman, make it part of the containers, containers Podman on GitHub, such that they can share code. Currently, it's implemented in C. Since containers, for historical reasons, are all implemented in Go, Alex is currently working on porting it to Go, such that Quadlet and Podman generate systemd can share code and can work together, bug fixes, new features, best practices. Just join forces there. One thing that we're discussing at the moment is integrating the Kubernetes support that I just mentioned, that is written also down in this blog post. I'm going to paste it in the chat, so if you're interested, you can catch up there, and integrate that into Quadlet. So that's pretty much it from the systemd side. We're trying to push things forward and join forces with the Quadlet folks. If you have any questions, it's a good time to ask now.
To me, going forward, we should sort of consolidate everything into this workflow. So it'd be nice if we start to de-emphasize podman generate systemd and move to a podman generate Quadlet workflow, so that we start to encourage people to use Quadlet, once it's into Podman, obviously, for how they describe it. I think we've heard from, there's two different communities that might be interested in this. One is people running Kubernetes work, basically designing their applications to run with Kubernetes, running them under Podman. It'd be nice to have a simple Quadlet that they could just specify the kubelet YAML file in. The second one would be for people just writing applications that they want to run in a container, and they could just fairly simply use a few entries in the systemd unit file to say, I want to run, say, an Nginx container in a Quadlet, and then underneath the covers, all the special stuff that Valentin showed in Podman systemd generate would just be generated based on that, and allow them to specify options. The interesting part, I think, will be, you know, how to do advanced stuff underneath there, and that's where, you know, we're going to have to allow, I call it a get out of jail free card, where you could specify additional options you want to pass into the podman command. But I think Quadlet could evolve to add additional fields and things to it. Anybody have any comments on this? Do they think it's the right direction, wrong direction? Reinhard, your volume is way low. Still low. Anybody else while we wait for Reinhard to rejoin? I'm going to call out Joseph. You played around a lot in this area. What do you think?
I like the Quadlet model a lot, especially for updates, keeping the containers running and everything. As long as it's customizable enough to, for instance, I'm going to set up my container with, you know, split conmon, you know, C groups, and I'm going to set them up as notify instead of forking and stuff like that. So as long as it's a customizable unit, I love it.
Yeah.
Sally.
Hey,
Nice to see you.
Hey, I know. Nice to see you too. I may have missed this in your explanation, but are all of the podman flags available in that simplified version of the unit file? You know, usually when I run podman with systemd, I have a slew of flags and specifications for how to run that container. Are those all available in this simplified version?
Yes, in a way, yes and no. So there won't be flags, but you can specify the systemd options directly in the file. Quadlet will just pass them along to, you know, what it will generate internally. So you can see it as a mix of an existing systemd unit with a simplified version, or, you know, simplified table for running or defining a podman container.
So the ports, the mounts, the you know, labeling, SE Linux labeling, all of that. How would I configure that through this?
There are fields in Quadlet. Dan briefly mentioned that before, where he said, you know, what he calls the get free out of jail card. We can, you know, at some point, I think we need to have a field which would be like arbitrary or miscellaneous options, where you can specify whatever you want, and this will just be thrown at the command line for podman run.
Okay.
But, you know, the important ones will be there. Images, probably ports, it's a big one, volumes, you know, the command that you want to execute and things like that. But the command line evolves so fast that we need somehow to get free out of jail card.
Got it.
But you know, once we got Quadlet merged into containers podman, then, you know, both can be shipped at the same time. So, you know, the version matrix makes it much simpler. You know, we don't have to check for which version of Quadlet is installed, or Quadlet has to check for which version of podman, because ideally, since they're in the same project, they, you know, will be shipped with the same package as well.
So Sally's question went also in my direction. I, by the way, find out how to configure the microphone properly.
Yeah, good enough.
So I really like this is the direction that you're heading. It seems to me that you are working on streamlining the workflows to focus on the common workloads. There will inevitably be these whataboutisms cases, and I think this can be addressed with documentation, the way how you present and demonstrate the feature. I think you can get away with focusing, look, these are the common use cases that we're focusing on. Here is the reference of all the options that we currently support. If you need an additional option supported, please get in contact with us. I think this is a kind of language that should allow you to get away. And on a related note, when you're saying you accept a Kubernetes YAML, when I was playing with Kubernetes YAML, I suppose that the Kubernetes object that you accept is of type pod, so you don't support replica sets or deployments or things like that. So that might be worth pointing out. What is the exact subset of the Kubernetes YAML language that you actually support that can also be documented in some reference?
Urvashi, I'll let you take this one.
Sorry, what?
Oh, she wasn't paying attention. He's asking for us, what do we support of Kubernetes and Kubernetes?
Yeah. So we support the pod type, the service type, the PVC types, and deployment type, but we don't support all the configurations under that. We support a few of them. We actually have this documented on pod in our repo as well. So I can link that to you, what we have supported right now.
I dropped a comment with a link.
Oh, thank you.
In the chat. I think Alex gave feedback, or he had troubles figuring out, what is actually supported. He's quite familiar with the projects and a great engineer, so I think others will have troubles as well. So I think at some point we gotta merge this document into the min pages.
Yeah.
And then it should be easier to explore.
Yeah, we'd also like to hear feedback of what, most of us aren't exactly Kubernetes experts. So if there's things that that people think we should support in Kubernetes with, just standard podman, we would love to hear about it. So, the fields in there that we don't support, do they make sense for a single node instance of an application? I mean, my goal is that people define I see Podman Play Kube as being a competitor against Podman Docker Compose, and with an easy on-ramp into Kubernetes. That's sort of the way I envision this thing. And what I want people in the future to do is to build applications and test them inside of something like OpenShift and Kubernetes. And then if they're going to run it just on a single node, then allow Podman to be able to start that application. So that's my vision of what this is going to do, and that's what I'm talking with customers into edge deployments and things like that, where you can't run a full kubelet. There's no need to run a kubelet.
We're
right.
20 minutes in.
Yeah,
so I think we should head to the next topic.
Yes, thank you.
This is going to be 3-hour Cabal.
Next topic is Dan.
Yeah, so Dan, Giuseppe said he couldn't make it today. So if you want to lead the ZSTD support, and I think there's confidential computing and Landlock support as well, but we can move things around. Let me know.
Okay, so I'll pull Valentin. I'll make Valentin turn his camera on in a minute as well. We've had really nice support for ZSTD or ZSTD compressed images for a while now. So in OCI, there is a mechanism to specify what compression algorithms to use for images, and the standard that everybody uses is gzip. But ZSTD gives us better compression, but we've also built really advanced tooling into ZSTD inside of Podman and containers image and other tool container storage to allow us to pull down individual files instead of the entire tarball. So traditionally, if you say had an image, say you have Fedora image, and someone pushes out a new Fedora image that the only one file in the Fedora image changes, say it's the Etsy message of the day. When you go to pull down that image using traditional Docker or Podman, you have to pull down the entire image, say 500 megabytes has to be pulled down, even though it's only one file and the image has changed. So we've actually added tooling for the last almost a year now that would allow Podman to look at the image and only pull down the one file that changed, the Etsy message of the day. The problem with this is the tool, if we start pushing these images all to container registries, then existing installed base of Docker and other tools that are a little older would not understand how to use ZSTD. We've opened up pull requests to containerd as well as Docker and to support ZSTD, and they've both been merged, but there's never been a release of a Docker version that would support the ZSTD format. Also, if we started pushing images with ZSTD format, all of the existing tools, any older versions of Docker or older versions of real old versions of containerd, blah blah blah, would start to blow up. They would not be able to pull the image because they wouldn't understand the encryption format that not the encryption, the compression format of the image. So we're sort of in this holding area, and we've been waiting for Docker to release a version, and then basically suggests we start pushing. But even if Docker finally releases a version that supports this, we're still stuck in a how do we support older versions of Docker? So Valentin, Giuseppe, and Giuseppe came up with a proposal that we start to push both versions to a registry. So if you do a podman build or a builder build of an image, and then you push it to a registry, instead of just pushing the gzip or the ZSTD image, we push both to the registry. And once we push both to the registry, basically they could be stored under the same name underneath the manifest. But what we would do is add a annotation to the images to indicate what kind of, well, in this case, in a lot of cases, a label to the image, so that we can identify that this one is compressed with ZSTD or this one's compressed with gzip. Also, the way tools work when they go to a registry, if they say, I want to pull the architecture x86-64 of Nginx, they will pull down the first one that matches that. So in our case, we'd have two images up at a registry that would match that name. But what we can do is we can make sure that they're sorted in the correct order. So by default, everybody would get the gzip version. So all older versions of Docker or even ancient versions of Podman would get the gzip version, and everybody continue to be happy. Newer versions of Podman would be able to go to the registry and say, no, I don't want the first one. I want the one that has the ZSTD compression. So they'd be able to start pulling down the ZSTD version of it. So the penalty they will have to pay here is that you'll have to push images compressed in both ways. But now we can start to take advantage of advanced pulling of images. And the advanced pulling would be available in all images that are based on top of all container engines. Podman, Builder, Cryo would all have an advantage to use the ZSTD compression. Containerd and Docker, even when they move to the new version, we will propose to them that they use the same mechanism for pulling the other image compression algorithm. So this is a proposal that we're working on, and we're making sure it actually works correctly. Anybody have any comments on this? Did I screw up?
I think it's a great step in the right direction. There's an alternative implementation of C standard, for partial pulls, which containerd implements with *gz. But to the best of my knowledge, to make use of it, you need to know which image is a *gz image. I assume it's implemented by means of OCI artifacts. The idea that we have, that Dan just explained, is pretty cool because, if we go down this path using annotations, which is still up to debate, but we want it to be as easy to use as possible. You can just imagine you can configure your node, for instance, in etc containers registries conf. You flip the annotation on. You say, okay, my node supports C standard, which, for instance, Fedora can now just ship this configuration by default, and boom, your pulls are, let's throw out a number, 30% faster. And it's entirely transparent to the user. The user, we don't have to worry about it. Everything will just happen transparently. There's no hidden magic by pulling specific tags or anything like this. This is where we want to go, while at the same time remain backwards compatible. As Dan mentioned, there are still, even older versions of Podman, Billet, Scopio, and Cryo don't support C standard, although they support it for a pretty long time. Yeah. Docker is about to cut a release that supports C standard thanks to Giuseppe, and then Docker users can make use of that as well, which is pretty cool.
Now, there'll be something in containers.conf, so you have a penalty on pushing because you'll be pushing twice as much, 2 images instead of 1. But there'll be something in containers.conf that allows you to specify if you want to push just gzip or if you want to push just ZSTD, or push both. So that option will be available. So if you decide that your environment's, these images are private to your environment, there's no reason to be pushing in both formats, so you can just move to ZSTD, and the only thing you're using is the existing versions, newer versions of Podman, then you can just push with ZSTD all the time. But if you want to have your image be able to be used by older container engines, then we recommend that you push with both formats. So a additional item on here is what's called confidential computing, which is I think we'll be hearing a lot more over the next 9 months that's coming out. One of the things that confidential computing needs to do is to actually not only compress the application, but actually encrypt it. And so there's special tooling being built to encrypt and the image and push it. But in a lot of ways, you really want to sort of have the same name, right? So you want to say this is the Nginx image, and then if you're running, imagine in the future you're running, say Podman with a flag that says run this image in confidential mode, instead of pulling down the non-confidential version of the image, you can pull down the confidential version of the image, but without having to change the the command line other than saying it's confidential. So the idea would be we'd allow you to specify, just again, have the image in the manifest with an annotation saying that this is a confidential image, as opposed to a standard image. And then the tooling could also verify that the image is confidential when it pulls it down, otherwise it wouldn't run it. So we should have a article explaining this available fairly soon. I think right now we're still debating back and forth on what this stuff should be, but we'll make this public and allow people to have further comment. Anybody else have any comments on this?
And Dan, is there a move for the other groups to adopt it as the standard, or do they have the same, performance benefits? I guess the main drawback or worry is that there's no end game. It's indefinitely, the default behavior needs to be you push both.
Well, I guess the end game would be at a certain point, there'd be, a sufficiently large base of people who are no longer on the old versions that we could just move to ZSTD only at that point. But we've been held up for over a year now, waiting to figure out how we can get this out the door. But with a huge installed base of Docker, it's, so I would say 2 years from now, maybe, that we could just switch the standard to only push the ZSTD version, because it is, just using ZSTD means that you get better compression, so you're going to be pulling down less bytes. But I don't know how to fix it other than to do this, because we can never upgrade. I mean, you can't get rid of the installed base, without Docker releasing and then time going by.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as long as we know that, okay, over the next 2 years, there's a path where all the other tools will support it.
That's why
we
we're doing a container.conf. So it, RHEL 10 timeframe, RHEL 11 timeframe, or Fedora 30, Fedora 40 timeframe will switch the default to be just pushing the ZSTD alone. Images, at a certain point when we have a feeling that would be safe to do, and then we could start doing it. But I mean, this is one of the things that's going to hurt containers for a while, is that, the installed base is getting very opinionated, and it's very difficult to add new features to pushing and pulling of images. Since we have no other comments, Urvashi, you want to go to the next item?
Yep. The next one is Landlock support.
Okay, so this one's me again. So for those that don't know, there's a new LSM security mechanism in the Linux kernel. It's called Landlock, and what that Landlock allows you to specify certain paths to an application in such a way that that path is only able to be used. So it's somewhat similar to AppArmor in that way. But traditionally, we've had issues with people, say, pulling images, and those images having attacks on Podman to, by dereferencing or, symbolic link attacks. So just imagine you're pulling down an image and you're saying that image should be stored in VARLab container storage, and somehow the people put something into the image that fools Podman to writing over etc password. That's sort of the standard attack. What Landlock allows you to do is say, at the beginning of the program, say Podman, just allow Podman to say the only place I'm ever going to write to is VARLab container storage, and if it attempted to write to a directory outside of that, then the kernel would block it, even if Podman's root would block it. So this is a new security mechanism that we're going to be looking to incorporate into the tooling. It might be more to protect Podman from itself, as opposed to containers, but we could also see this as being protection for containers, in that you could say that the container is only able to write to its container storage, and we could, this would be in addition to SE Linux and AppArmor and everything else. It's just adding a new security mechanism, and that's called Landlock. I've asked Giuseppe to look into it, and at this point, we haven't really moved forward with it. Go, Adi.
I think there's already a PR in the runtime spec for this. So I think it's almost approved. So once this gets in, I think we'll have knobs for all the Landlock features. So I think both the runtimes, runc and crun, will be implementing it.
No, I think that's interesting. But figuring out how we want that to work, and whether or not Landlock would work well with volumes, those are the things I'm interested in. Is like, okay, can we, how difficult or how simple is it going to be to implement Landlock for container control? But I also like the fact that Landlock could potentially allow us to basically allow Podman itself, or to Builder, or anybody that's using the tooling, to basically say that the application, not the container, but the application is landlocked, so that because the application inherently has to sort of trust the image it's pulling down, or it's just using tar on top of an image. So to be able to further lock down our application, the container engines, to make sure that they don't accidentally attack the system. So yeah, that's great, Adi, to know that they are plugging it in. I'm just interested in how well it's going to work. But so if anybody wants to further investigate how this works, we'd love to see how this thing evolves. Anybody, any questions, comments on Landlock? If someone wants to drop a link into where Landlock is better described than I did, that would be great. Where is she next?
All right. Next we have is podman-desktop packaging. We do have Florent and Stevan on the call, but I wasn't sure who's leading this topic. We did have some discussions internally yesterday, so if you want to just continue from that.
Yeah, I'm going to make Lokesh talk about this.
All right. Go ahead, Lokesh.
Oh, okay. Put me on the spot. So let me send you the GitHub issue, which talks about podman-desktop packaging. It's right here. So long story short, someone by the name of Crypto Milk has already done the packaging, and it's available on OBS, Open Build Service. Now, I guess the ask was to include it by default in official Fedora. But to get that done, we first need to have Node.js Electron package, and that has to be a separate package. And after that's done, we can package podman-desktop as an RPM. Now, speaking from my own side as a packager, I do not want to be on the hook for the Electron package. The official Electron package. Now, there are options like doing Flatpaks or snaps, or we could just continue using Open Build Service and provide packages for Ubuntu, Debian, Fedora, CentOS, and anything else. So I guess that's where we stand currently. Anybody has any advice?
So the goal, I mean, to me, the goal is eventually we want to just be able to say DNF install Podman desktop, and that would pull in Podman and everything else. And from a Red Hat perspective, I think we want to get to the point where you could do that in Red Hat. Now, I don't know with what Lokesh just said. I don't think Red Hat's going to want to support Electron. Now, Red Hat probably has more liberal standards for packaging, so we might be able to package that Electron as a sub, as a inside of the Podman desktop package. But I think that's where the pain point is going to be. Stefan and Florent, do you have any comments or ideas?
How to handle that is a question indeed, because it's some effort, definitely, and how we can. The challenge is obviously Electron, as you said. I don't know if there have been other asks in the past for an Electron package on Fedora, so it will be interesting to see if there is this. Otherwise, do we know if it is possible to package Electron inside of our package without having it officially available?
Right, that won't work for Fedora because Fedora would demand that Electron be packaged separately as an independent RPM. And that would be used as a dependency for Podman desktop. Because Electron is not purely JavaScript, and it would also be a dependency for other tools that use Electron.
Yeah.
So it has to exist separately.
We just open up a request to the Fedora develop list to see if anybody wants to manage it.
There is, or rather there was a thread opened a few months ago, but it went silent, and it was opened by the GitHub user CryptoMilk. I think his name is Andrea. So I guess we can just resume that thread and see how it goes.
Yeah, and he's not interested in doing it.
He said he does not have the time. He has the sources packaged on Open Build Service, but he does not want to do it officially for Fedora.
I mean, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but Electron has its own ecosystem. Most Electron apps you just download and run, and they auto-update themselves, or you can control that using the Electron IPC process. So I don't packaging, splitting apart the Electron bits. I mean, Electron itself packages Chromium and all of the dependencies for your app so that you don't have a system dependency. So I'm not sure that's ever going to work with Fedora's model of, you wouldn't have a central Electron Chromium that everything would share. Like, it just doesn't work that way, right? It's closer to a snap than it is to anything else. So you could just, wget it and run it. And use the built-in Electron functionality to do auto updates rather than going through all the politics.
Yeah, the problem, well, two problems with that. One, how does that pull in the correct version of Podman then? Because we'd want the somehow to set it up so that podman-desktop 4.2 pulls in Podman 4.2. And I don't think, unless you're talking about someone embedding Podman into snaps or Podman into Flatpaks.
Yeah, okay. So you're not just going to run the system version of Podman. It's not just the Electron app. You want all of it in one package or in one.
Well, the beauty of packaging is just that we can control the requirements. And right now, podman-desktop is somewhat tied to Podman itself.
Right.
So
okay.
It'd be nice if we could somehow specify, control that link.
So you're not treating Podman Desktop just like a UI for Podman that uses the system installed Podman. You want it all to go together in one pack.
I mean, that's the way most people are doing it right now, but the problem with that, I think Stefan and Florent have found issues when people use older versions of Podman against newer versions of Podman Desktop or vice versa. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
Also, let me put it this way. If I am to be on the hook for maintenance, I would prefer to continue with the open build service route because I'm pretty comfortable with it. And I can generate packages for most of the popular distributions. Now, if we want to do Snap or Flatpaks, that's something new. I'll have to learn. And I don't really know if it's going to work well. So.
I mean, my other goal is, the long range. We all want to get, in my opinion, we want to get get Podman Desktop packaged up for RHEL. And while RHEL has looser requirements than Fedora does, it actually, or in some ways tighter. RHEL doesn't want to support the use case for any tools other than Podman Desktop, and so we can hide the fact that we're using these tools underneath Podman Desktop.
Can RHEL make an exception this one time that it does not require the package to exist in Fedora? I don't know.
You're
I'm saying that but I mean, who is actually going to be on the hook for maintaining Electron and the embedded Chromium and updating it for vulnerabilities every week?
Yeah.
I posted a comment. I think maybe for RHEL, like EPEL is probably the easy way.
Right. So Chris, about EPEL. EPEL means the package has to go into Fedora.
Yeah.
So then we have the problem of someone owning Electron separately. Yeah.
We run it in a container. Lol.
Anyway, so yeah, I'll get the conversation started again on the Devo mailing list and see where that goes.
Yeah, and we at the same time we can see if there are other asks from the community on this. I think it's important to look at that.
Yeah, go ahead.
No.
Because yeah, there are, I guess, quite a few other tools like Signal Desktop, Element Desktop, that would also depend on Electron. Anyway.
Yeah, we could also open up the conversation with more of a desktop, the desktop team at Red Hat, and see if they have any ideas of this. Although just point us at Flatpak and say, leave us alone. What do we do on Mac and Windows for updating those? I mean, the brew team just grabs whatever the latest version of Electron is and throws it in.
So for brew, we are providing podman-desktop, and podman-desktop embed our own copy of Electron.
Okay, so that's sort of the RHEL model then. That's most likely if we ever made this package available for RHEL, that's what we would do.
So yeah, Electron is embedded in podman-desktop, and
yeah,
we are just updating the packages.
And we're doing that on Windows as well? Or?
So we are providing for brew on macOS, and on Windows we are updating winget repositories and scoop repositories, and we are in the process of providing on Chocolate repository as well. So we are providing pull requests to these software packages. And on FlatHub, it's compiled on FlatHub as well.
Yeah, we certainly want to be available on as many platforms as we can, and as many distribution channels as we can as well. But I think at some point we may need to be also cautious about multiplying all those different channels, and really making sure that we are there are few that are kept always up to date, that we maintain, that we know how to maintain, or we know that we can sustain and we can automate all the different distribution channels for the tool. That's the two ways, because we cannot scale indefinitely either. But
and for now, everything is automated. So just need to press a button and it's great pull request.
That's even better. And I think the Flatpak was done by the community.
No, by myself. Yeah.
By yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's part of the community.
He is.
Yeah. But probably I like the OBS way because we can distribute on different platforms as well. So it may be a good start to see how it works.
I agree. I want this available as much as possible in as much different places. But I still think we have a goal that the entire inheritance tree would work properly, so that people don't end up in weird worlds where they have ancient versions of Podman with podman-desktop trying to talk to it, or vice versa.
So, by the way, if we have a Flatpak already, so isn't this a solved problem? We still need to worry about RPMs then?
Yeah, I think we still have to worry about RPMs.
Okay.
So if anybody on the screen wants to jump up, I'm sure Lokesh would love to hear from you. And let's go back to the Fedora community and see if we can get some happy volunteer to help us out. Back to you, Urvashi.
All right. So the next topic is Podman Kube Apply, which is me. So I will quickly go over it since we're almost at time. All right. So if you attended the last community meeting, I demoed this new command that we're adding called podman-desktop. So basically, podman allows you to generate the Kubernetes YAML from your podman workloads. So the kube-apply command, what it does is that once you connect it to a Kubernetes cluster, it will automatically deploy the generated YAML to that cluster for you. So just going over the help command quickly. So obviously, when you generate, you need to have a kube-YAML file name, so a file. So you just do podman-kube-apply file name. Now, to connect to a Kubernetes cluster, what we do is whenever you create a Kubernetes cluster, if it's with Kubernetes, OpenShift, Minikube, etc., you'll always get a kubeconfig file with it, which holds the authentication that you need. So it holds the client certificate and key, and it usually contains the CA certs. I have noticed that sometimes it doesn't contain the CA certs, and you can have a separate file for your certificates. So with the command, we have given a flag called CA cert file, which you can use to point to the CA cert file if it's separate from your kubeconfig. But if it's in the kubeconfig, podman-kube-apply or reads through the kubeconfig file, it picks out the client key and certificate, the CA certs, and any other authentication that you've given it, and it creates the client transfer with those authentications so that you can connect to your Kubernetes cluster. This all happens behind the, in the back, so you don't have to worry about that. And if you see here, over here, you can see that it's saying that my default kubeconfig file is this path over here. That is because it's kind of common practice that when you work with Kubernetes with a cluster, you can do export of the kubeconfig environment variable and set it to your kubeconfig file. So whenever you just do kubectl get pods, kubectl, etc., it knows it connects to that kubeconfig file and does all the authentication so you can connect to your cluster. So here, because in my environment I had already done that, so that's why it's saying the default is that. If you don't do that, we have the kubeconfig file here, flag here that you can use to point to your kubeconfig file name. And one more thing is when you're running in a cluster, you might want to deploy in different namespaces. So by default, the namespace is default. And then if you want to change to another namespace you've created, for example, my new namespace, whatever, you can just set that with the NS flag over here. Once you do this, we use the Kubernetes API endpoints to connect to it. This is an example of what it looks like in the code, how the URL is created for that. It gets the cluster server name, and then API v1 namespace, whatever namespace you want to deploy to, and the type. So this one is going to deploy a service, basically. What we support right now is just the stuff that we support in Podman. So that is pods, PVCs, services, and deployments. We can expand this. We can basically support any, it's basically just connecting the Kubernetes endpoint. So you can kind of run any Kubernetes YAML, even if it's not generated from Podman. So we can add support for more different Kubernetes types as well. I can give you a link to this demo that I recorded of this working in action. I can just quickly go through that. Let's go. So basically what I did here is I created a pod called my pod here. And then I generated, no, sorry, wait, did I skip too quickly?
Are you intending to share your screen?
Yes, sorry. Can you see this now? All right. Yeah. So OC get pods, I have nothing there. And then in my podman pod PS, I have a pod created there. So here I am generating a YAML file from that pod that I created, and I'm just piping it directly to the kube-apply function. And when we do OC get pods, you'll see that it deployed to my cluster there. I'm using OC because in this example, I was using an OpenShift cluster, but it should work with any Kubernetes-based cluster. Yeah, so that's a quick overview. Sorry if I sped through that, but I think I just wanted to bring this up here to see if there was anything else like the community would like to see and the support for kube-apply here, or something that we might have missed in implementing this, basically.
So I kind of like that you're doing the pipe there, but would it be more easily discoverable if I basically had podman kube apply and I specified a container ID or a pod ID.
Yeah, we could do that. That would just end up calling generate first to generate the YAML and then pipe it through.
It was temporary, yeah.
Yeah, so that's we can definitely do that.
Do people like that idea? Does anybody have any comment on that? Is there any ability in Kubernetes to download a kubelet? There's no communications to get that out of a running environment, is there?
To get the YAML for a container that's running?
If I have a kube application running inside of a cluster, is there a way to say, give me the YAML file that was used to launch that application? Is there?
Yeah, so at least in OpenShift, I know you can do it in the console. I don't know about the Kubernetes console.
Yeah, there's no kubelet command. There's not in the Kubernetes protocol. Right.
I'm not sure. Well, Adi says there is. Go ahead, Adi.
I think like there are a bunch of export commands with the JSON format, although like I see a lot of people do edit deployments and you get the raw YAML which is applied by the user. Although some fields are like auto-populated by the Kubernetes API server because like they're not mandatory while you're applying the spec itself. So you get some extra fields, but the original YAML stays intact. I think that's how all the disaster recovery tools like Valero works. They just export the YAML and they store in the form of JSON and reapply it when you recreate the cluster.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that in like the OpenShift console. You can go and edit it over there directly as well if you want to make changes.
Because it might be interesting to be able to do the equivalent of that, but basically I have an application that's running in a cluster. I want to run it locally and see what's going on with the application and sort of examine it. Basically, podman kube play deployment name type thing. Might be a crazy idea, but I like crazy ideas. If we can go most of the stuff we go one way, we should be able to go the other way, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's just kubectl get and -o and the format, which is like YAML. So it's just the object type, and you do YAML or JSON, so you get the dump from the API server.
Yeah. Right.
Requirement. New crazy requirement. Or two requirements. Anybody else comments?
All right. If there's nothing else, then before we quickly close, reminder that the next community meeting is on Tuesday, October 4th. If you have any possible topics, feel free to put them in the chat right now, or you can email me or Tom or the Podman list mailing list. And then the next Community Cabal will be on October 20th.
Now, I think at this point, we usually open up to anybody have any questions or any comments or anything they want to discuss. This is a very silent bunch. What's everybody turn their screens on so they stop paying attention again? All right, at this point, we can turn off the recording.
Yeah.
Then if people want to make comments with